written down. Let me get the formal YouTube intro out of the way, and then we can go from there. Okay. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, Internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you are doing well, and it's time for an interview, a conversation with the one and only Phil Elverum, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, singer, mastermind of the Microphones, of Mount Eerie, of many records in the lo-fi singer-songwriter and indie scene that I and many other people and publications have reviewed over the years. I hope you guys are excited for this interview. We're going to get into it, talking about Microphones in 2020, everything that's kind of been happening past that point, anything before as well. First off, Phil, how are you doing? Thanks for coming through.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Just personally, I'll say it's been a while. I think I interviewed you one time before, and that was when Tumblr was still relevant. And I think it was just an audio interview, and it might have been around the time that you came out with Wynn's poem.
Yeah, I was trying to remember when that was. I feel like it might be my imagination, but like for some reason I always associated you with a house show in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Did we
meet there?
I've seen you a couple times. The few times that I saw you was in Connecticut. And because that's where I'm out of. I saw you, once I saw you tour Wynn's poem, then I saw you another time when I think you were touring Lost Wisdom, and there was a point in the show where you had said, we're near Yale, and I know there are a bunch of people who go to Yale in the crowd, and if any of your parents are really super rich, there's like this space, there's this island off the coast of Washington I would like for you to buy for me. And then I could live there. So, or if you have any parents in politics who could pull me any favors to just kind of land me this island, that would be great. Did that come through?
No.
Nobody came through with the island.
Sometimes it works out. I used to request specific things from the audience pretty regularly. Oftentimes it was like a place to stay, or maybe like our car broke down, we need to ride to the next show. But that was kind of a big ask.
It's a big ask, but honestly not unheard of. Bjork has her own island.
Yeah. I'm not into the having one's own island thing. That's too extreme.
You've changed your mind on the island since then.
No, I'm into the islands, but I think they should be shared.
No, yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It seemed like a sole ownership thing. Now,
for sure.
You must have been really like riding kind of a career high at that point for you to have such a big ask.
Well, Wynn's poem, I think maybe I was more geared towards like extreme hermit lifestyle. I had more of an ideal towards solitude. Now maybe having a kid made me realize like, you got to actually participate in society to be a well-rounded human being.
That's true.
Somewhat.
It's also one of your most rock-oriented records. So maybe you were just like kind of feeling that rock star attitude from the album too.
Unlikely. I don't think I've ever felt that attitude.
All right. Well, let me dig into some of these questions. Since you just mentioned it, creatively speaking, from fatherhood and just kind of to single fatherhood in general, have you noticed with the years that you've been sort of, putting out work since then that it has impacted your process in any significant way, or the way that you approach writing and recording and kind of conceiving songs in general?
Definitely. Yeah. Total transformation. I used to just be like work mode all the time. I mean, everyone who has a kid says this. It just like takes over. It sort of obliterates whoever you were before. And I didn't know how I was going to make music when I was about to have a baby. I was sort of just, we'll see. And then I became a single parent because, Genevieve died. But it worked out. Like I just had to make different kinds of records, simpler, less production, less like huge atmospheric constructions, more just like, here's the song, let's get it documented.
Is there anything personally, without obviously like getting it so in detail to where it's like, breaches a comfortability point or something, but obviously like when you have a child, you want to sort of maintain a certain kind of world for them, you know what I mean? And is there any kind of like concern for you in terms of like not having that kind of working or recording world kind of breaching past that point where you are kind of more in that parent role? Do you try to keep them separate, or is it not so much of a big thing to like kind of have her around or in the area or doing her thing as you're recording, as you're conceiving, as you're kind of creating something?
Yeah, no, I like modeling a creative life for her. I like making that seem like a normal thing. So only to the extent that like she's a loud kid, and I
Right.
don't want necessarily yelling to be on every track. So, but that's no, I like having the workspace in the house and having instruments everywhere. And she's very musical too, my daughter. So I want it to seem normal to her that people follow their creative ideas and make things out of them into adulthood.
In that interest and in that focus, I mean, a lot of people who do parent, sort of like slowly end up seeing themselves and their own kind of personality traits turn up in their kid, be it through, as you kind of say, modeling, or just it being kind of ingrained into them. On the artistic side, are you kind of like seeing signs of that at this early age at this point?
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe. We have different aesthetics. She's really into pop music these days, like really into it. Every morning on the drive to school, so we're just like scanning the pop station or looking for like whatever the new tracks are. So, and it's like an educational process, I guess, for both of us. And I am into it also, but yeah, no, she's actually like, she's only 7 years old, but she's kind of on her own creative path, more of a performer than me.
Oh, so, really like has the microphone and likes to be in the spotlight and so on and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing actually. I don't want to go like on and on pumping her up.
Right.
but I feel like she's like got musical gifts, and I don't actually take any credit for it. I think her mom was the one that had more of that sort of instinctual like music that doesn't turn off. For me, it's more of like a sit down and like focus on it and build up a thing. But some people just have like jingles always blasting in their head, and she's one of those.
Personally, as not just a parent, but also like a musician, and at least in my opinion, quite a successful and an influential one. Like, over these years, have you put much thought into what is your own kind of personal philosophy when it comes to kind of healthy, sensible music introduction in regards to children? Because obviously, like, there is a world of kids music out there that, I mean, from like, a fan standpoint, is pretty low grade in terms of like what it's saying, the aesthetics it brings to the table, the music brings to the table. Yeah. But, there's obviously also a world of music that's maybe far too angsty or aggressive or exploring feelings that aren't exactly appropriate. You know what I mean? Like for you personally, sure. Thinking about that recent documentary that was put out where you had that moment where you were like listening to My Bloody Valentine in the car, you know what I mean? Like, what is your own personal feelings and philosophy when it comes to, it's like I can show my child alternative music or music that has at least some kind of like, in my opinion, some artistic substance to it, but like not go so far into a place where we're doing something that, they wouldn't comprehend or wouldn't quite get because they're too young.
No, I don't really have boundaries about that, other than like really explicit stuff where she might repeat really like super bad swear words at school. But even that we do sometimes. So no, if anything, her whole life, I just couldn't tolerate kids' music. It's so bad, like the baby music. There was like this one Raffi lullaby CD that had this one song on it that I was okay with. but other than that, it was just like, no, we're not doing that. So she would listen to it at like my parents' house. But when she was with me, we were listening to the record collection, and her whole life has been this musical education. And I want to keep that up. Well, now it's like, now she's sentient enough that she can be like, no, we need to listen to the new Lady Gaga track from Top Gun, Dad.
Talking about that generational crossover, now that she's kind of gotten to this point, has that kind of opened up your own personal window in a way? Because I imagine, during those years before you were a parent and kind of like, just engrossed into what you were doing, you probably weren't spending a whole lot of time just generally scanning the pop stations, has this
I
put
was.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, it's fun on tour, especially listening
okay.
to whatever. Yeah,
But still,
yeah.
through her, has there kind of been anything that you found yourself listening to that maybe you wouldn't have been otherwise, but you ended up kind of liking or just kind of getting into it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. 100 Gex is a recent example.
Really?
Pretty. Oh yeah,
Are you
yeah,
serious?
yeah. Last night she was like, she came over to my ear and was just whispering the lyrics to Doritos and Fritos into
No, stop,
my
stop,
ear.
stop it.
Yeah.
But I'll say personally, this isn't even a question, but it's a statement to kind of just bounce off of you. Like, I've found through the years that I've been doing what I do, that 100 Gex has kind of become almost like that, benchmark group in terms of when I'm talking to people who are around my age or older, who, I'm sure these types who you grow up in. They're reading all the music magazines. They've read all the reviews. They know all the hit bands. It's like you'd see them at every show and they would be into anything that's alternative and is relevant, or cool in some kind of way. But like talking to some of these people as they're getting as old as me, 100 Gex is kind of proving to be the band in many cases where when I show it to them or we're talking about it, they're like, I can't. This is the breaking point for me. For whatever reason this is, I feel like this is what the kids are into and I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's what the kids are into, and I know it's not for me. And I feel like a voyeur or something looking at it from the outside, but I'm into it. And I feel like that sort of generational exclusion feeling that happens naturally as we age is something to push against. I feel like my dad was a good example of that in like the early 90s. He'd be like, "Oh, is this the new Sonic Youth? Yeah, could you dub me a tape of that?" And so he didn't have that feeling of like, this isn't for me. He had totally an open mind and like cultural, everything was available to him. I think that's kind of a good thing to try and do. Because yeah, like music changes, culture changes, and we should evolve with it if we can, or at least like remain open, ideally.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't know what her musical diet is right now, but I can at least say that when I was a kid, my mom, while she wasn't the type to, put me on to a ton of stuff that she was listening to as a kid and say, this is real music and da-da-da-da-da, she was open to whatever I felt like listening to. So, she would compliment or show that she also was really into when I was listening to Green Day or Offspring or TLC or Coolio or something like that, because I grew up on a lot of those 90s gems too, and yeah, I mean, I think that's like, I think one of the most important experiences you can have with your parent, that they're open to whatever it is that you're listening to.
I've seen parent-kid dynamics that are the opposite of that, where the parent's just like, "Oh, what is that you're listening to? This is so, oh, you know what real music is? Put on the Smiths or whatever they treasured from their, and it's bad, and the kid's just like, and yeah, and it creates a rift. It's just a bad dynamic.
It is, and even though like in a certain subset of things, we could say like, okay, the Smiths are hip, the Smiths are this, the Smiths are that. Even though it is a hipper, cooler version, you are kind of just like reliving that same stereotype of, again, the boomer parent saying that's not real music. We grew up on the Beatles, or that's not real music. We had this or that or the other thing. It's,
or even further back, the parents who were like, the Beatles are crazy hippies with long hair.
The
real
Beatles,
music.
the Beatles are dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a cycle that goes forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
People being like, "What's this John Philip Sousa? This is subversive."
Yeah. Yeah, there was probably a point where that was the cutting edge as well, and yeah, all the children were listening to that and rebelling against whatever their parents were were listening to prior to the Sousa marches. So I wanted to ask a little bit in terms of like how your artistic process since Microphones in 2020 has been sort of evolving, with that record being as almost like as narratively a mark as it is in your discography, and just how kind of retrospective and reflective the album is. A couple of things I think have been kind of defining the writing style and perspective of your past several records. I mean, I guess to kind of dig into it with the first question is, as you're kind of creating new songs now, have you found yourself still in this kind of nostalgic narrative style where you're looking back on things that have been happening in the past? I mean, there certainly is still a lot to look back on. I mean, the Mount Eerie record, for example, is about to turn 20 as well.
Yeah. I'm recognizing the impulse in myself to do that, to keep looking backward, and I'm pushing against it. I don't want to do another thing of that. I think, yeah, sure, I could keep talking about my own past forever, but I feel like this last record, Microphones in 2020, it did it. It did it deeply. It did it a lot.
Yeah.
So I want to sort of get back to whatever else there is, which I think is like symbolism, metaphor, depth that doesn't have to rely on like biographical specificity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that was really my next question, because another thing that's kind of defined all of these records recently that you've been dropping is just this diaristic writing style, where you are kind of like, in some cases, giving us like a beat by beat to beat description of like, occurrences and experiences and just kind of things that are occurring.
Yeah, no, I think that is interesting, and I don't like regret doing it or anything. I'm proud of that work.
For sure.
But I don't want to repeat myself. And also, I do feel like the thing that can be earned from like looking inward and looking at one's own self, and like, going so deep into self-analysis, I feel like I did my best at that, and I want to look elsewhere now. I don't want to make music. Also, like, it's weird that I made that, or that I spent so many albums looking inward and centering the self, when truly I never want it to be about me. I end up writing about my own self because that's like what I know. But I sort of want to look outward again.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who, listen or has been listening to your stuff since the 2000s, and enjoyed that stuff, enjoyed the recent stuff as well. It was definitely a change, because in your music, usually there is like more of a focus on this vastness and this largeness of existence and life and the planet and the universe. And yeah, I mean, it was a shift. I mean, and obviously through the years that you would put in, a shift that you were prepared for, because, those records are so detailed and they are so compelling, and you do really put the listener in your own perspective of, what you're experiencing. But so, you say that when you're kind of shifting here on some of the newer stuff, is it about going back to the present? Is it about going to that more abstract place that we remember early Mount Eerie and Microphones kind of existing in, or is it something else?
I hope it's something else. I'm not very far into working on any next thing yet. It's still very in like blob state in my mind. So yeah, I've been not working on music that much. If that makes sense. I think about it all the time, but I haven't actually like made anything happen. I'm giving it a lot of breathing room, I think. I think it's a good moment in my life to sort of reinvent or pivot or do something, and it's unclear what that is.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that in itself almost seems like kind of a significant shift in your creative process, because I know over the years, like, you typically would find yourself in a place where you would like write as you would record these tracks. You know what I mean? Are you finding yourself in more of a place where you're conceptualizing things just mentally first and then going to do it, as opposed to just kind of like sitting down and just throwing whatever out there, and if something sticks, we go in that direction?
Yeah, and that shift was the one that happened more with like having a child.
Right.
And I just couldn't live the lifestyle where I was like slowly meandering my way to the studio every day and just like spending 14 hours spaced out, like trying out experiments. That lifestyle is in the past. I can't do that anymore. So now so much more of this work has to happen while I'm doing chores, like living life and doing childcare, whatever. But like, meanwhile, it's happening in my head.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a shift.
Hmm. So, just kind of like, talk about maybe some of the aesthetics changes of, your music over the years. How do you think that may further impact, I don't know, like going forward, some of the more experimental, ambient, droney, or abstract elements of, the Microphones or Mount Eerie's music?
Mhm.
Because obviously, there was like this committed focus on records recently where it is more of kind of a almost like a traditional singer-songwriter style where you are focusing more on kind of concrete narratives and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Have you personally found it to be more difficult to come up with these very strange and otherworldly kind of like sonic excursions if you don't have that time, just kind of like let it ruminate and sit there and just kind of explore?
Yeah, it has been difficult just based on the time, and I was shifted from recording in a studio with lots of on analog machines and stuff
Hmm.
to a tiny room in my house with a laptop and one microphone.
Hmm.
So yeah, the focus was more on the idea, on the essence of the thing, rather than the world of it.
Hmm.
But now, for this next work I want to do, I want to get more into not the same building up big atmospheric things, but yeah, the ideas I have are very not even like musical. They're more like collagey sound, like noisy, pretty experimental. I don't know. I feel like I might make some pretty challenging records next.
All right.
Maybe no singing.
Mm-hmm. Does that feel almost like I don't know a snapping back in a way to things again have been so clear and been so concrete and have been so linear in terms of the way narratives and stuff like that are playing out, and now we just like kind of want to react to that and go into something that is just trying to smash apart those expectations and just kind of
Yeah,
give fans something that's more open to interpretation.
maybe there's like that's playing out subconsciously, but truly it feels like that's what I want to make and that's what I want to hear.
Hmm.
And I for myself, I always have to pretend that I have no fans
Hmm.
and that I'm the only audience. That's the only way I can do it.
Hmm.
So if ever I catch myself thinking like, okay, people expect this of me, I'm going to do this. I have to just like cancel that and just look inward.
Has the growth in relevancy of stuff like social media, for example, has that made kind of maintaining that mindset more difficult over the years? Like this idea that I need to put myself in kind of a singular and isolated place and not think about how people may receive it, and that I have fans and so on and so forth.
Probably, yeah, it has made it more difficult. Although I'm not that active on social media, so I don't yeah I don't do much of that stuff. So maybe for me, it's more like playing shows, and so I like to sell my own merch. So
Right.
that's, I think, where I encounter the recognition that, like, oh, people are interested in this, and people are, whatever, showing up and giving me compliments. Oh no.
The uh, before I move on to this next question, I think the last thing that was kind of lingering off of some of your more recent records, which I know, obviously you have no regrets about the creation and release of those LPs, but like, since the release of those albums, has there been anything, at least in your own mind, that has made you reflect on the fact that with those records, you really kind of like broke the fourth wall in a way that you haven't on any previous album. You know what I mean? And you let people in such an extreme way on those albums. Like, have there been any kind of like unintended effects of that you've kind of ruminated on and maybe you're not like so pleased about?
um I remember being stressed out about that right before A Crow Looked at Me came out.
Mm-hmm.
I had made these songs that I think did that. Basically, they like let people in a kind of scary way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really nervous about what would happen, how that would be received. But the opposite happened. Like the opposite of my worries happened. It was like people were let in, and it was very warm, and everyone was so kind and inclusive. And yeah, it just has been good. It
Mm-hmm.
turns out that like being open, doing like the scary open thing pays off, and it's worth it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, Unintended consequences, but good ones.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I mean, because it seems like you've kind of consistently stuck with that up until, there's no end being released.
Totally. And that was another pivot where I've never like shown my daughter or like our domestic life. And like I said, I've kind of don't, I want to decenter myself in a weird way from this. So to put out this little biographical movie that showed everything, it was uneasy. I had to be talked into it, but it turned out so nice.
Yeah.
So, I felt like it was worth sharing.
So we've been talking about like a lot of changes aesthetically and artistically that have been kind of moving through your music over the decades. But like, what about this, again, this idea that I was referring to earlier in terms of like vastness, the infinite, the way that you talk about these things in interviews, like it almost feels like spiritual in a sense, though still like centered in a very kind of secular way. Would you say these ideas and these feelings are still very much informing your process and everything that you do, or even that have you kind of like started to change your mind on in a way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, kind of, what's my spirituality?
Right. And again, you seem, at least when I hear you talk, and maybe you might want to kind of maybe spell it out if you feel like it. You seem like one of the most spiritual, non-spiritual people that I see talk about this kind of stuff in music, because it doesn't seem to kind of be centered from a religious standpoint, at least in like a traditional sense, or in a way where you can kind of identify it as being a part of a certain sect of something. But, there does kind of seem to be kind of a grand spirituality to the way that you talk about these things that I usually only ever hear in almost like a religious context, So I guess that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer it exactly, but I know it's true. It is like that. It do be like that. But,
sorry. It
came out like that.
It do be like that. Yeah, it do be like that.
But I don't. If anything, a lot of the ideas I feel like are probably they're from Buddhism. But even then, I don't know if I would say like I'm a Buddhist in that way, where it's like I believe in this, and this from Buddhism. So, but yeah, that's maybe the closest religion. Mm-hmm. I am not one, like I'm so uneasy with the idea of belief, and also there's so many things in like the Buddhist tradition that don't really chime with these other feelings I have towards like the interconnectedness and like hugeness of the place we live, the land, and how we are not separate from it, and blah blah blah, all this like sort of naturalistic stuff. Maybe I'm trying to make my own new mishmash.
And and again, I guess to like, refer back to the original question, would you say these ideas and these feelings are still kind of like driving your creative work now, or is it something else that's kind of like distracting you philosophically?
No, that's still kind of this unanswered central question is what's the deal with this place where I find myself and my relation to it. Yeah. Even though I've made like decades of albums about this, I feel like there's still juice there.
Yeah,
for me at least.
And it seems like maybe this is like too blunt of a question, but especially on Microphones in 2020, there is this kind of stated perception that like, again, the interconnectedness of things, but also in terms of like time, because we're just basically on this endless continuum, and any sort of like starts or finishes to anything that we put on things in terms of like time are just arbitrary, I suppose.
Right.
It seemed like you communicated that pretty clearly, but like with that being your philosophy, and with the ease at which you could kind of get lost in a perception like that, like when exactly do you personally know when to end things and when to stop things, and when you're like, this is enough, like this is, even though things are never done, this is definitely done, and I need to do something with it now.
that sort of gets at the heart of the creative process for people, and it's just intuitive. I think that's a big part of being an artist, is knowing when is good enough. Because yeah, people could overwork things forever, and they often do. And we all kind of know what that looks like in a painting or an album. So yeah, it's just intuitive.
Got it. I wanted to ask you just about lo-fi and indie music just in general. I mean, genres and scenes of music that, obviously you've participated in, but you never anticipated or guessed that you would kind of play the influential role in them that you did. But, still with that being the case and you being well aware of platforms like Bandcamp and maybe some of the output that goes on there, like, do you have your heart warmed, or are you encouraged by kind of like seeing the next generation of DIY home recorders kind of like, taking to that platform and almost doing what you did back in the day, but sort of like for a new era, whether it be like a car seat headrest or an Alex G or, any number of countless artists out there right now who are just kind of doing their own thing?
Yeah, I think it's amazing and wonderful that I feel like it almost has to continue. Like, people without the means of production are kind of always going to find a way to do it and create community around it in whatever aesthetic form it takes. I'm kind of also tuned out of it. I don't keep up that much, but with like Emily Sprague, florist, she's an example of someone I met or heard her music and it was just like, oh, wow, awesome. Young people are brilliant and they're doing it and they're so awesome. They're just like, there's geniuses still. Yeah, that's an example.
Mm-hmm. And, some of these artists, well, even in the indie world, there has been like a bit of a trend, or maybe all over the place, there's been a trend, whether it be car seat headrest, Jens Lekman, for example, and Taylor Swift as well. I mean, comparing you to Taylor Swift here a little bit, all of whom recorded or re-recorded records that are seen as like kind of classic by a lot of their fans. Given the avid kind of self-recorder that you are, is that something as like a process interests you in any way? Maybe like redoing a classic or kind of like, reliving artistically or musically something that you may have done in the past to kind of change it or alter it or make it, I don't know, or present it in some different way than people maybe have been used to?
I feel like I do that. I didn't know it was a trend. I mean, I know about like Taylor's version, but I always thought that was more of a way of her getting paid, right?
It was her. It is. It's true. But we could always have the Glow Part 2 Phil's version or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Yeah. No, yeah. I feel like I might need to actually push against that impulse in myself, because my work is always so intermeshed and self-referential.
Sure.
That I feel like I risk alienating outsiders if I get too into it. Also, yeah, I want to move forward always.
Got it. You've kind of described a little bit how your recording process has changed over the years, especially with your home life altering in the way that it has, going more to, kind of single microphone in a room, digital, so on and so forth. As you kind of embark on this next chapter, are there kind of any plans for you personally to head back into more of an analog space, or like mix it around, or kind of do like, a double of both in some kind of way to kind of mesh those two worlds a bit more in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I don't want to use a computer anymore.
Yeah.
I want to just go back to, I still have my reel-to-reel stuff and my analog stuff. So I want to just do it more slowly and more frustratingly by using analog. Yeah, I want to do it the obsolete way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for you personally or artistically, what about that process makes it worth it for you, despite the frustrations and despite the lack of convenience, obviously?
Yeah, it slows you down and it makes the decisions more mindful. And also it makes, makes accidents more beautiful. So when something happens accidentally, you are more prone to keep it rather than on a computer. You just like whack the space bar a couple of times and do it again and try and get it perfect. And that's um, sort of leads to a weird false perfection that I tried to not get too hung up on that, but it's just so easy with the computer to do 40 takes of a single line, and I don't want to do that. No, I'm not just talking about singing either. I'm talking about like the weird ways that tape can crumble, and then like the connection is like shorting out, and there's distortion over here. Like all of my favorite parts of my albums are usually accidents and problems like that turn out to be beautiful and cool.
Mm-hmm. No, I think what you're kind of describing there is incredibly accurate. Like, you know, some of the biggest details on, you know, It Was Hot or anything from that era comes up in like the weird noises or just things that you don't really expect to hear, or isn't necessarily like coming from an instrument. Or even if it is an instrument, like, you know, there might be a bit of a flub or somewhere or something, but it still somehow adds to kind of the chaos and the magic of whatever you're doing. You know, so you'd say generally when you are recording digitally, does it make you more conscious about leaving blemishes in the record in a way?
Definitely. Yeah. I tried to keep, treat the computer as if it were a tape recorder, reel to reel, and just do things in one take. But it's hard to be pure about that when it's just so easy to do it over again.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, getting off of music for a little bit, you know, what other projects, because obviously like, you know, you've put out books and photo books and, you know, lots of different pieces of media through P.W. Elverum and Son over the years. You know, what other kind of releases and projects are you working on currently that we might see coming down the pipe soon?
Well, I've been working for the past 5 years or something on this huge book of art from Genevieve, my wife who died. She was a cartoonist and painter and stuff. So it's a huge monograph. It was a kind of major project. It's almost 600 pages. It's a massive book. And finally it's coming out by Drawn and Quarterly, the publisher, in like October. That was a big one. Really happy with how that turned out. It's not like mine, but I did, built it, designed it, and wrote parts of it. And yeah, it was a big, huge thing. What else? Honestly, I've been living in this home, and we moved into this house like last year, and it's just like building a woodshed and cutting firewood for next winter and living, doing just like life, cooking and eating.
Survival, honestly.
Yeah.
When you're cutting firewood, it's not just life; it's you're surviving.
Yeah, but it's truly like my favorite thing. So it's not. There's no reason for me to be doing an interview with you about my firewood lifestyle, but it is the answer of like what I've been up to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's kind of your natural state. I mean, is it not? I mean, you know, again, with the documentary, you did describe there being a point when you were much younger where you just weren't living with electricity and running water and everything. I mean, could you ever see yourself, at this point or, you know, at a future point in your life, living maybe more slightly connectedly in a suburb or something, or that just kind of makes your skin crawl?
I feel like I would try to put in a wood stove in subdivision. I don't know. For me, maybe it's childhood, just like that. Specifically, wood heat. It has such a deep need. It's like a deal breaker.
Yeah.
It just feels right.
Yeah. Feeling heat off of anything else would just be unnatural.
No, I mean, I also have a heat pump thing for when it's a cold winter morning, and yeah, I'm not like Amish.
but though you're not too far off though. Like if you could go to the Amish community and you could vibe there, you'd be fine.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. I would probably get banned in a day or two, but yeah.
What would ban you from the Amish community? Like what would be that thing that would get you kicked out then?
Well, I feel like I'm a little bit pokey or like needling about people who are zealots about anything.
Okay.
It would be hard to just be chill with people's extreme rigid beliefs,
Well,
whatever they are.
well, that's interesting if you're if you're willing to get into this, because at least like in your music and past interaction that I've had with you and the way that I see you kind of interact in other contexts, obviously like in other interviews and on camera and stuff like that, you come across very polite, like when you talk about needling, is it a very kind of gentle needling,
Yeah.
or, are you
Oh,
like
actually, I don't know.
or are you like downtown at the PTA meeting with like the sign up and you're like, no, no more this, no more this,
No,
like,
no, I am polite. Yeah, politeness is a value of mine.
uh-huh.
Maybe it's my proximity to Canada,
Hmm.
but it's uh it's a gentle needling. I don't know what it would actually be like. I've never been immersed in an Amish community. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, other than obviously the book that you were just telling us about, before I let you go, is there anything else for us to kind of look forward to? I appreciate your time and what, everything that you've been telling me and kind of updating us on what you've been working on. Is there anything else that we should be looking out for? Or are you just going to be kind of vibing and living life until the next idea hits you and then you'll just pursue it?
Yeah, I wish I had another product to hype, but I don't at the moment. It's just early. It's gonna happen, but it's still in this sort of uh, early state. So yeah, it'll be a while,
Okay.
but I hope to do this for the rest of my life. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna stop. So even though I'm like cutting firewood now, this is my life. I'm
Mhm.
gonna keep doing music. Thank you for the attention and for talking to me.
Yeah, no problem. Again, thanks for sharing. And, again, I know that you don't have the description of whatever it's going to be like right now, but you're in progress. And that's all I wanted to know. And that's it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Talk
Have
to
a
you
good one.
later.
Have a good day.
Bye.